Hi, this is Amazon Jude coming to you from Wyoming in my dark dungeon. I don't have enough lights on right now, but war room. ELD and mandates. Mr. President, I think we need to examine who's in charge of transportation and Federal Motor Carriers Association. We are not getting any relief as small trucking companies from the hassle of these ELDs in hours of service. So I did this video, and no copyright intended. It's to send to the President of the United States on Elaine Choi, Department of Transportation, and Mr. Martinez, Federal Motor Carriers Association, new secretary, and Senator Babin down in Texas. I'm going to play some of his. He's been at the forefront trying to fight for this. We don't need to be controlled, micromanaged. Nobody wants to punch a time clock on their dashboard. Nobody wants to give up stopping to take their dog go pee or poo in the middle of their run and lose hours. They just can't afford to do it, so they can't take their pets. A lot of people live in their trucks, and they need to be excluded from this. Well, there's a bill, and it was, I don't remember the number of it. I'll make sure it's in this video. But it excluded trucks and truck companies with 10 or less. That is a fantastic idea, and I'm going to tell you why. When Obama created this monster, and it went to committee. I can remember the fella testifying. I don't remember his name, but you can find it on YouTube. Just punch up ELD mandates hearing April 2014, and you'll get right to the video. But anyway, when they did this bill under Obama, it was done like what they call a midnight rule. Okay. Granted, it was supposed to take 2 years to get into place, and we were all supposed to jump on board and say it's okay. But that's not the point. The point is that we don't need to be micromanaged. We know what we're doing. Most of us have been in the business anywhere from 25 to 35 years. And a lot of them are hanging up their driving wheels because they don't want to comply with this stupid stuff. They didn't take any road conditions in when they did this so-called study on it. Road conditions, traffic, being parked alongside the highways, moving trucks around in your shop to get fixed or repaired. You know, all of that counts against somebody's hours of service, whether it be the mechanic who gets in the truck and drives it into the shop, or you're done for the day, you just dropped your load and you're 30 minutes from home, but your hours of service are up, so you can't even drive that 30 minutes to go home to be with your family. So anyway, I'm going to give you some of these videos, and then we're going to send it to the President. Mr. President, I think we need to roll back some regulations. I think Elaine Choi and Mr. Martinez need to be told that this is very important. Now remember, we voted for you, and we've stood by you all this time, and we believe in you. And we know that the media and the Democrats are attacking you at all four corners. And we know that that's been weighing heavy on your mind with the Mueller stuff. We know what you're doing. We understand. See, this is something they'll never understand because we're plain talking people. And whether it hurts your feelings or shocks and awes you, you always know where you stand with people like Mr. President, and with people like me, like Mr. Babin, Senator Babin, or Representative Babin out of Texas. And we've got some really good Republicans in office right now, and we need to get rid of these Democrats so we can roll back some of these regulations that are stifling business. I mean, think about it. Here's a prime example. When the hurricanes happened, what's it been, 2 years now? They had to basically suspend hours of service for the truckers to get supplies down to these disaster areas. Okay, and now agriculture wants a waiver so that they can get their cows to market and you know, their grain and hay and stuff like that. and not be, you know, have to be on a time clock to get there or whatever. And the point to that to me is, if we have to make waivers for these businesses already, then why are we doing it at all? When the 2014 April study came out, I can remember the guy testifying to the committee saying that this was going to save time. Well, it turns out it was 20 minutes a day they saved. That this was a safety issue. Well, that's not really a safety issue because most people who are truck drivers do it because they love it, not because it's just a job. We get into this business for a reason. It's like a welder. A welder welds because that's what he loves to do. You know, a doctor cures diseases and treats diseases. That's what he loves to do. But anyway, getting back to my point on this, we don't need to be micromanaged. What if there is a fire on the road and you're shut down for 11 hours while they clear the road from fire that's on both sides? Okay, your whole day is gone. You've not gotten your freight there on time. They call someone else next time. That's exactly what happens. So, you know, doing this to the small truckers or any trucking industry, I don't want any of this because they didn't even bother doing all of their studies when they created this law. And if you listen to the hearing, you can tell them, you can hear them actually admit that they only used 11 largest trucking companies in the United States. They had no owner-operators there to testify. They had no small business trucking outfits there to testify. It was just these 11 large, like Warner and FedEx and stuff like that. Well, they can use these logs, and it's probably a good thing to do it. But as far as doing it on somebody who's got 5 or 6 trucks or 1 truck or 3 trucks or even 8 trucks, they can manage just fine without having to be told what to do with their business. I mean, after all, they did create their business, you know. And if you don't get the loads there on time, you lose that business. That's the big part. And some are going to say, oh, you might be cheating and blah, blah, blah. You know what? Let me tell you something. As somebody who's been in the business with my husband's been in the business since he was 19 years old and he's 60 years old. He has driven truck all of that time. He's probably got 16 million miles on his butt driving behind a wheel. And in all of those years, he's never had an accident. One time a lady slammed into the side of his truck, but it wasn't his fault and he wasn't ticketed. He hasn't had a ticket since 1972. Okay, so there are responsible truckers out there. And there are a lot of them. And you know what our biggest bitch is? When we're driving down the road and we've got 10,000 gallons of fuel or 10,000 pounds of, you know, hay or whatever on the truck, and then some ignorant driver pulls out in front of us. It's like pulling out in front of a train. That's how accidents happen. These people think they can pull out and get, excuse me, pull out in front of these people and not get hit and not get hurt. You know, and another guy brought up a good point in one of these videos. These trucks today are made out of fiberglass, and so are the cars. Somebody's going to get killed when you do that because they're junk. And you know, not to take our mind off of what I'm talking about, but we need to get back to building our vehicles with steel and iron. They were safety. And fuel is not a problem. I don't care who comes up with it. We can produce enough fuel in the United States to run us at least another 100, 200 years of driving my good old tanks. I drive a 1976 Ford Highboy. I love it. Some guy hit me in one of his Dodge 2010s, 2012s. I'm going to kill them because I'm made of iron and I'm of steel. So anyway, let's get back to this. The E.L.D.s. We have to get your attention, President Trump. They're not working. They're not. You can't find one on the market that is sanctioned by the Federal Motor Carriers Association at all. I have guy friends that are running trucking businesses, and when one of those E.L.D.s go down, their truck's sitting in the shop for 3 to 5 weeks waiting for replacement parts to come from some obscure outfit that sold it to us. You know, like we're in Wyoming, everything has to come in either by truck or, everything has to come in by truck. Nothing comes in by plane. So it's truck and train. That's all we have. And to put these mandates on the lifeblood of what keeps this country rolling is going to slow down our progress. It's going to slow down our economy. It's going to force small carriers and small owner-operators out of business. I'm wondering if that isn't the plan altogether to run us out of business so that just the big, conglomerate monopolies get all of the business. So anyway, let's go back and listen to these guys a little bit, and I'll
one day truck drivers decided they weren't going to haul freight. This country would shut down.
Truckers nationwide are threatening to park after being mandated to switch from paper logging to electronic logging devices that will monitor the driver's speed, braking, and hours.
They're enforcing this E.L.D. as a safety issue. There's nothing safe about it.
The mandate says nearly every truck in the country must install E.L.D.s by December 18th, but some truckers are concerned that new devices could be easily hacked.
If it's a computer, it can be hacked. I mean, and the things that are going to be taken over is our brakes, our accelerators. I mean, we steer them ourselves still, there's none of that. But if we can't stop, and if they're accelerating, we're going to be at fault for wrecks. That ain't going to be our fault. I mean, in paper, you're not going to have nobody hacking a piece of paper.
Today I talked with a third-generation truck driver. He knows the ins and outs of this business. He says the E.L.D. mandate may seem like a good idea at the surface, but it could cause more problems. John Allen spends most of his time on the road. He's got his routine down to a science. It isn't just a job, it's a lifestyle.
Trucking has always been in our family. I mean, I have uncles, cousins, everybody we drive trucks. It's in our blood.
He sat in his first truck when he was in diapers. Now his 4-year-old daughter is learning the ropes. But things have changed.
The last couple of years, it's really becoming more of a robot system than it is a trucking system, and trucking is not robots.
For years, Allen logged his hours by hand. Next month, it will be done automatically by an electronic device. And since truckers are only allowed to be on the road a certain number of hours, it could mean Allen and others won't be able to get to their destinations on time, or they'll lose money trying. He says it won't only hurt truckers, it can also hurt consumers, driving up the cost of transporting goods. It is such a concern, it drove Allen and others to go to Washington, lobbying for change and pressuring the president to sign an executive order to stop it.
I hope they understood what we're saying. I hope they took what we're saying to heart.
News Channel 15 contacted our local lawmakers. Senator Todd Young says he's spoken with people in the logistics industry and will continue to relay their comments to the administration. Senator Donnelly says he's aware of E.L.D.s and says the safety of Hoosiers and drivers is essential. Congressman Banks says he wants to delay implementing the mandate for 2 years. In December, he and other truckers plan to make a trip across the country to raise awareness about this problem and others.
Majority of these truckers say they've logged thousands of miles the old-fashioned way, using paper logs without any issues. So the fact that they now have to install these electronic logging devices which monitors their every move just isn't right. Hitting the open road is both a passion and livelihood for these truckers.
Wake up out your window every day in a new state. It's a beautiful job. But the mandates are not helping us.
That mandate they claim could take away their freedom to get their jobs done is coming down from the federal government, which is requiring them to install what's known as E.L.D.s, or electronic logging devices. A black box that'll log their miles, hours, their personal information, including where they are at all times. Information some truckers say they don't want to share.
That truck is my home, my business, my moneymaker. Okay, first of all, it's my home. I have a right not to have a GPS tracking device on my home.
Saying the device is no different than an ankle bracelet.
If you've not done anything wrong, you've abided by FMCSA rules, you're a safe operator. You come out here, you drive these trucks every day.
you perform your job safely, why must you be monitored by the federal government like you're a criminal?
According to the Federal Motor Carrier Safety Administration, the new mandate is meant to make it easier and faster to track, manage, and gather data on the number of miles logged by drivers. It's also meant to keep both truck drivers and other people on the road safe.
They say it's about safety. It's not about safety because you're racing against the clock.
Time they'll have to watch because truck drivers will now only be allowed to drive 11 hours a day and be given a 14-hour window. The truckers say these devices don't take into consideration a multitude of factors like traffic, road conditions, and most importantly, the mental and physical state drivers are in.
One size doesn't fit all.
Truckers say these new devices are also very costly to them because they'll have to pay monthly monitoring fees. The new mandate takes effect starting December 18.
What specific costs would your business have to incur to comply with the ELD mandates, and how much of a burden would that be on your small business?
Well, it's going to be quite a burden. The costs for the ELDs can range anywhere from, there's I think about 200 different ones on the market right now. Some of them could be as small as $100. Some of them could be as much as $1,000. Then you have monitoring fees that could start anywhere from $30 to $40, $50 a month, depending upon what you want the ELD to take care of. And, you know, as a small business, as a fleet like me, I have, my wife works in an office at home, and then I have an office manager that she takes care of the dispatch and, you know, filing and things that way. We're not going to realize any savings from this because they talk about a savings that's going to be realized from using ELDs. The big fleets can do that because they've got to figure in their fuel taxes, their, you know, cost of operation and things and all like that. So we're not going to be able to realize that. Some companies that have used that are actually going to gain money from the technology because, as referenced in the 2007 Senate hearing that was held on truck driver fatigue, one company that testified was saving $182,000 in 1 year because their transmission costs went down $11,000, and they're got rid of one position in the office of $50,000. So they've saved $182,000 in 1 year. I'm not going to lay Doreen off that works for me because I'm going to save, you know, whatever it is. And if you have times 7 trucks, if you extrapolate that out, if you bought the top line, the top of the line type ELD, you're looking at $7,000 plus monitoring with no added safety benefit. One of my drivers has over 34 years of 0 accidents. How is it going to make him any safer? So we're not going to realize it.
Mr. Speaker, millions of American truck drivers helped elect President Trump last November, and I'm calling on him to step in and give them a hand. President Obama left office back in January, but a $2 billion regulation that he wrote in 2015 to require electronic tracking devices to be put in every truck in America is still scheduled to go into effect this Monday. Yes, an Obama regulation that shamefully seems to remain on the books is going into effect this Monday under a Republican Congress and White House. The Department of Transportation can give a 90-day waiver for all truckers from this mandate, giving several waivers for specific industries, including one just this week. Instead of offering fairness and relief, they're picking winners and losers. Millions of American truckers are pleading 24/7 for relief from this mandate using the hashtag ELD or me, but it has fallen on deaf ears at the Department of Transportation. Mr. President, you call the shots in your administration. Please issue an executive order today and instruct the Department of Transportation to give all truckers relief from this mandate for 3 months. Don't implement this colossal Obama mandate a week before Christmas.
From Texas, Mr. Babin, who is the sponsor of the ELD Extension Act of 2017, is recognized for 5 minutes.
Yes, sir. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. It's a pleasure to be back in here. And I had recently, our office had sent a letter to the president asking for a delay for all sectors of the trucking industry until April the 1st. And since then, DOT has granted a waiver for 3 months to ag haulers and cattle haulers. And so I think that's proof that DOT certainly has the authority to grant a waiver to whomever they wish in this process. I'd like to hear from what each of you thinks. Would that be something that you would be in agreement that all sectors of our trucking industry should have a waiver of a temporary period of time, like the 3 months that the cattle and the ag haulers have?
Yeah, I would agree with that. I mean, I think it's a laudable thing. I think that it actually needs to go farther than that, but any reprieve to work out some of these problems associated with it would be welcome.
I would agree, and that it does need to go further. And just a quick comment: if logs were the answer to safety, why does the government on FEMA loads throw them out the book, throw out the logbook for all the drivers if we're running FEMA loads and there's 26 states still operating with all these trucks bringing emergency relief, fuel, propane? These guys are running way over their hours. It's not a problem. What happens if my customer has a problem with a plant shut down and I got to get something there so people won't be out of work? What's the difference between what the government allows and what our customers might need?
Right.
And currently, APA members are granted a 14-hour hours of service waiver for an 11-day period over the 4th of July, busy 4th of July holiday. And any ELD use that we are mandated to use basically nullifies that waiver that they've already admitted that we have a very safe track record and have established that over at least a dozen or so years of a impeccable safety record associated with that time period that we celebrate and perform these displays that probably the nation's fireworks displays, 70% of all displays performed in that 2-week period.
I think your example of the relief that was given to the haulers, the livestock haulers, is evidence again that the federal government and the agency, Motor Carrier Safety, have recognized that there's some flaws in this whole thing. There needs to be time taken with a stay on the entire process and have industry work with the regulators to come up with common sense. One size does not fit all across the board.
Absolutely. And then, I'd also say to my colleagues that if a company likes their ELD, and there's a history of it, and some of these companies really do. But I've talked to far more of my constituents and also outside my district who drive that they have grave concerns about the unknowns and the question marks regarding it and how safe it is. But if it saves the company money, if it actually does make the highway safer, and they found that each individual company finds that, then certainly I would. I'm not trying to abolish by any stretch of the imagination ELDs. Keep using them. In the words of our previous administration, if you like your ELD,
the bill will delay the implementation of the mandate that all truckers have to put what they call an ELD, an electronic logging device, into their vehicles. The ELD mandate is estimated to cost stakeholders, people who are in the business, more than $2 billion to comply with this thing. And this makes this one of the most expensive federal transportation rules in the last 10 years. It's a massive unfunded mandate that provides really zero safety, economic, or productivity benefits. And I think the bottom line is that it's going to be very, very difficult for many of our truckers to implement this by the date that it's required at the present, which is December the 18th, 2017, this year.
Did the calls you got from truck drivers among your constituents play a role in your decision to introduce this bill?
Well, let me just say this. I used to be a truck driver at one time. I've done a lot of things in my career. I wound up a dentist. But at one time, I started out driving a truck in the military, and also drove a lumber truck down in Texas, where I'm from. My heart goes out to these truckers. The profit margins are thin. These trucks are expensive. Insurance is high. You know, anything we can do to help that profit margin, make sure that they're doing, have safe practices on the highway. We definitely want to do that. But this ELD, electronic logging device, will cost a trucker anywhere from $1,200–1,400 all the way up to almost $4,000 a year. And again, like I said in our earlier conversation, we think it's going to be more than a $2 billion impact.
I'd like to ask you a little bit more about your trucking background, because it sounds like that played a big role in your decision-making here. You mentioned some of the things you hauled. What kind of a rig did you drive, or what kind of routes did you drive?
Well, I actually learned to drive a 10-ton truck in the military. We used to pick up tank hulks and clear these things out, and then I also drove it wasn't a big tractor-trailer rig as a lumber yard when I worked for a lumber company, but it was a big flatbed, and so I had a commercial driver's license for many years in the state of Texas. Even after I was a dentist, I still had a CDL, and then when they started requiring, what do they call it, hours.
Oh, the logbooks, hours of service.
Yes, yeah. When they started requiring continuing education and the logbooks and things like that, I finally let it go. So I have a big place in my heart for truck drivers.
Now, I'd asked you earlier, and you mentioned your trucking background. Have you heard from a lot of truckers about this issue?
Yes, sir. We have. We've heard from people very concerned that they were not going to make this deadline, and it's going to be easy, I think, or let me just say this, it'll be easier for our large companies with great big fleets to comply with this as compared to someone who's got a single truck or just a few trucks in their fleet. It's the same thing in any business. A larger business, if you're a big bank, you can comply with some of the federal regulation a lot easier than you can if you're a small bank. And I think it's the same thing with our trucks. And we know that there has to be some safety operations and some safety features on our trucks. We want highway safety above all. However, this mandate, we can't seem to see how in the world this is going to improve safety. It's certainly not going to be economic, and I think it's certainly going to harm productivity at this point in time. So we want to delay this for another 2 years, and that's exactly what this bill will do.
And very simply written bill, too. It's really just a few lines basically saying just that. Add 2 years to it.
That's right. Exactly right.
I wanted to ask you something else, Congressman, because we have seen a lot of hearings, oversight, appropriations hearings, and so far over the past couple of years involving the Federal Motor Carrier Safety Administration, the primary agency regulating trucking. And it seems like we're seeing more and more instances of where your fellow members of Congress have been calling into question whether regulations are directly related to safety or effective at promoting safety. And certainly we've seen in Congress overall in the administration basically a greater willingness to look at regulations and potentially cut back on them. Do you see the ELD as part of a larger problem or part of a larger challenge that Congress needs to be more involved in?
You know what? Let me just, Mark, you hit the nail on the head there, because for 8 years under the previous administration, we have seen an enormous burgeoning of regulatory bureaucracy coming out of the administration, and on all levels, in all fields, and in all aspects of the federal government, not just in transportation, trucking. I mean, we've seen it in banks. We've seen it, in water control. We've seen the, in terms of ozone rules and regulations and other, like I'll just give you an example, the Environmental Protection Agency coming up with some new rules for us to comply, with ozone, and they're increasing those standards to the point where it's going to be very, very difficult for many areas of the country to comply with them, and they're increasing the restrictions even before we've been able to comply with the previous new standards and restrictions. And so the new Congress this year, working hand in glove with our new president, President Trump, has had congressional review acts. We've rolled back, gosh, I think we've had 14 CRAs, congressional review acts, rolling back many of these late, what we call midnight rules that were that the previous administration had levied against American business and our economy in the latter just few days and weeks of their administration. We've rolled that back. We're constantly dealing with environmental protection agency rules, with Internal Revenue Service. I mean, there's you name it. The bureaucracies love to increase the rulemaking. Their rulemaking authority, I think, has gotten out of hand. And certainly, we want clean air. We want safe highways. We want clean water. We want honest and good banks that keep, a lot of capital on hand, or an adequate amount. But the long and short of it is that when you have too much regulation, it costs jobs. It costs American jobs. It also costs companies. They can't comply. They have to. They're paying more taxes, more fees, and they have to lay people off. And then the next thing you know, they've moved overseas. And this is what the Trump administration is all about, and that is to deregulate while keeping, keeping the environment clean and all the things that we need to do. There has to be some common sense so that the American people will have the opportunity to have high, good-paying jobs with benefits, and be able to live in a clean environment in a place where they've chosen to live.
Congressman, I want to ask you a couple of other questions, but the most important one to me is, obviously you have a background in trucking that helps you understand this issue, but most members of Congress don't have that. As someone who's been both in trucking and Congress, what advice can you offer to truck drivers out there who call into their members of Congress in terms of getting their message about this or other trucking-related issues across? How would they go about? What is the best way for them to communicate that message?
Well, you know what they need to do? They need to call and tell their congressman that they are tax-paying citizens, they're raising their families, they're making their communities better places to live in, they have an honest, good job, they're moving our goods and our services across this country, and they want good highways, and they want less government interference. They want the government to please get out of the way, let them do what they're trained to do. And, each one out there, call and ask their congressman to co-sponsor this bill, the H.R. 3282, and call it the switchboard here at the Capitol, which is 202-224-3121, or they can go look them up on house.gov, house.gov, and they can send their message that way. And that's essentially it, Mark.
Do you see your bill potentially heading down the road toward a full repeal of the requirement for ELDs? As you know, since Congress put it in the first place, that would be what's needed. Do you think that is potentially in the future?
Well, you know what? I'm not going to venture to make a guess there. All I know is at this point in time, we can't comply. Most truckers, especially the small operators, medium-sized operators, are going to have a hard time complying with this. The large trucking companies, I think it's going to be an onerous task for them as well. It certainly won't hurt them as bad, though.
Okay, I think I got enough in there for the president to call Elaine Choi and Martinez up on the carpet, to discuss what they can do about this ELD, because the only ones getting rich off of this are the makers of these things. I just have to wonder which Democrat made a deal with I don't know, some Chinese company that produces these by the thousands. And I know I read an article the other day too that said it would take 5 years at current production to be able to equip every truck in America. So for 4 years and 4.5 years, people are going to be out there that can't afford these devices or can't get them. I know it took us 6 weeks to get our first one, and then it was another 3 weeks after that to get the others. And during that time, we were running illegal. I mean, granted, we waited till the last minute, well, because we were waiting on legislation, you know, because Babin had asked for a reprieve for a few months, so we were hoping on that. Owner-operators, independent drivers were speaking with legislators. We went to Washington by, 1,000 trucks to call attention to this. Somebody has got to do something about this. It's killing the small business guy who's in the trucking industry because they're broke down all the time. They're not sanctioned by the government. If you're someplace rural like us, it takes weeks to get a replacement for that. Then you have to find somebody that can service that. And I couldn't find but one in the whole state of Wyoming that even services these damn things. So that's another one. I went to Senator Barrasso and Mike Enzi, which is Wyoming senators, and also Liz Cheney, our rep. And I spoke to them along with a couple of my trucker company boys about fighting for this to be overturned and to rescind these regulations. And we got, you know, basically the lip service out of Barrasso. Cheney did finally sign on to Babin's bill. And we had like 52 senators, but it was never introduced on the floor. We were cock-blocked by the American Trucking Association and their Democrat pals because they're okay with it. American Trucking Association is okay with screwing the little guy. They get all their big finance money from the big trucking companies. You know, like even here in Wyoming, we have a Wyoming Trucking Association. They don't do nothing for us. I mean, we have to buy our bill of ladings from them at $100 a box for probably $50 worth of paper. But anyway, I thought I'd give this to you guys to look out there, and I wanted to send this to President Trump. I will post it on his Twitter feed and Don Jr.'s Twitter feed. I tried to speak with Elaine Choi through emails dozens of times. I get no response. Martinez, I haven't heard hide nor hair about him, where he's at, what he's doing, if he's doing at all anything. I think President Trump needs to call those two up on the carpet, like I said, and ask for an update of where they are in some of these regulations that are killing the trucking industry. So anyway, President Trump, we have faith in you. We know that the Democrats and the socialists and the liberal nut jobs are in the media is throwing all of this garbage at you all the time, attacking you 24 hours, 7 days a week. Don't wear down. We're not wearing down. You can't wear down either. Take it all in stride. Remember, we out here that support you and voted for you know what's going on. We know that this is an outright attack on your presidency and taking back America, because these guys had sold America out. They sold them out in Iran. They sold them out to whoever would buy our secrets, our intellectual property, take our jobs away, overtaxed. We know what they're doing. They're just mad because they lost power. And I hope everybody in November turns out really good for all of our Republicans and vote for it. If we can take a vast majority of the House and the Senate, they can't stop us anymore. They won't be able to put the monkey wrenches in. I mean, they can slow things down maybe. But if we have a large enough majority, we can start passing some bills. We can start rolling back some more regulations. We can start getting the economy going really good. Instead of 4.1% GDP like we got today, we could be up in the sevens like Japan and like China. And there's several other countries that economies are doing a way lot better than ours. See, our wealth was drained with this last 8 years, or actually the last 15 years, because I can't think of a good president for a very long time. And they were all puppets. We know that. They did whatever whoever pulls their leash. And that's the thing about Trump. He doesn't have anybody on the other end of his leash except for Melania. And that's okay. So anyway, there you go, guys. I'm going to send this out to President Trump. Please, please, please call Elaine Choi and Mr. Martinez up on the rug and find out what they're going to do to save our trucking industry.